Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitamsha Om Ajnanatimirandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Mano Bhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadha Mahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Janmadyasya Yatonvaya Ditarata Sharate Shwabhigya Swarat Tene Brahma Hridaya Radhikavaye Muhyanti Yasurayah Tejo Varimridam Yata Vinimayo Yatra Trisargo Mrisha Dhamna Swena Sadhana Rastakuhakam Satyam Param Dimahi Narayana Namaskrityam Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswati Vyasam Tato Jayamudhirayat Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripasinubhirevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasari Gaura Bhakta Brinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna. Good morning. So we're covering Srimad Bhagavatam 9:31. I hear. So I'll pull that particular verse up and then recite it and then try to discuss it. Sharing my screen here. Okay. So Tasya Sadhura Papasya Brunasya Brahmavadina Katam Vadhamyata Babror Manyate Sanmato Bhavan. Translation: You are well known and worshipped in learned circles. How dare you kill this Brahmana, who is a saintly, sinless person, well versed in Vedic knowledge? Killing him would be like destroying the embryo within the womb or killing a cow. Purport by Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. As stated in the Amara Kosha Dictionary, Bruno Arbake Bhalagarbhe. The word Bruna refers either to the cow or to the living entity in embryo. According to Vedic culture, destroying the undeveloped embryo of the soul in the womb is as sinful as killing a cow or a brahmana. In the embryo, the living entity is present in an undeveloped stage. The modern scientific theory that life is a combination of chemicals is nonsense. Scientists cannot manufacture living beings, even like those born from eggs. The idea that scientists can develop a chemical situation resembling that of an egg and bring life from it is nonsensical. Their theory that a chemical combination can have life may be accepted, but these rascals cannot create such a combination. This verse refers to Brunasya Bhadam, the killing of a Bruna or destruction of the embryo. Here is a challenge from the Vedic culture. The crude atheistic understanding that the living entity is a combination of matter belongs to the grossest ignorance. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. So, as the backstory goes, we're hearing about the dynasty of, who is it? Ashruman, I forget. I think he comes in the dynasty of Ishvaku. And as I always mention in these classes on the lineages of the Manus, the purpose is to teach us about Dharma Mamantarena Sadharmaha. The purpose of the discussion of these lineages of Manus is to teach us about Sat Dharma. Sat Dharma means the true Dharma, or the Dharma by which one is can have insight for how to live in this world skillfully. So in the discussion of this line, they are zoomed in on the life of someone named Sodhasa. So in his life, at one point, he had killed one Rakshasa. Rakshasa means a man-eater. As hard as it is for people to believe, there are entities who eat men. They're cannibals. They exist even today also. They're existing. According to the Bhagavatam in the 5th canto, these Rakshasas will take even government posts and devour the people, not only physically, but in other ways also, as we see today. So this king Sodasa, he had killed one Rakshasa, but he let his brother live. So the brother wanted to take the revenge on Sodhasa. So he figured out how to become a cook in his court. And at one point, Sodasa had his spiritual teacher, Vashishta Muni, was visiting. And this Rakshasa cook, he made some preparation with the human flesh inside. And Vashishta, by his, power, could understand that there was some human flesh was there. So he felt disrespected and he cursed Sodhasa. Sodhasa was going to retaliate, but his wife, what was her name? Madayanti, I think it said her name was. She convinced him not to retaliate. So he had to accept the curse. And what was the curse? That he will develop mentality of a Rakshasa, a Brahmana Rakshasa, man-eater. So he was cursed and he developed the nature, Swabhava. He developed the nature of a Rakshasa. So being overwhelmed by such a nature, he suddenly felt overcome to eat the man. So here's there in the forest. And in the forest, when Brahmana was there, engaged in copulation with his wife. And immediately, Sodasa, as a Rakshasa, he seized him and was going to devour him. So his wife is desperately pleading with him not to kill her husband. So, and that passage where the wife is pleading, that is where we locate this particular verse. So this particular verse, Tasra Sadhura Papasya Brunasha Brahmavadina Katam Vadamyata Bror Manyate Samatopavan. So this is the wife she is pleading with Sodasa as a Rakshasa to not devour her husband. So there's a process called upayasa in Vedic culture, which means like the diplomacy. And in this process, 4 techniques are used, known as sama, dana, bheda, and dhanda. So sama means some attempt at conciliation, pacification of the antagonistic person with whom there is some tension. If that doesn't work, then one may try dana. Dana means to give people what they want, give some donation, some charity, satisfy the desire. If that doesn't work, another method is bheda. So bheda means to apply the logic or the trickery. We use the word gaslighting today to dissuade someone from a particular line of action. And finally, if that doesn't work, last technique is danda. Danda means to stick. That means you have to chastise, you have to fight. So this process is called upayasa. It's a form of diplomacy that you'll find mentioned in Dharma Shastras and also in Shastra, Srimad Bhagavatam. It comes up in many places. Like when Vasudeva, Krishna's father, tries to pacify Kamsa, he tries all of these techniques with Kamsa. Finally, only one technique worked, was to give the dana. So he offered his children in exchange for the life of his wife, for example. So this is, you'll find in all the Shastras, this discussion of upayasa when dealing with material affairs. So here the wife, she is also trying some of these techniques. First, she tried the sama technique, which means like pacification. She tried to pacify him and remind him of his former glory. And not only former glory, but his former values as a king. And that this was beneath him. This was unworthy of him. She was trying to, in one sense, you can say she was trying to remind him of a more ideal self-image. Many times, people, not many times, all the time, in the material world, we engage in demoralized activities or activities that are not worthy of us. Maybe you can recall a time, maybe it was yesterday, maybe it was an hour ago, where you've embraced some activity that was not worthy of you in the true sense. And the reason that happens is because we have some demoralized self image inside. So when the image of the self is not bright and beautiful inside, then we give ourselves permission to do all sorts of activities. But if it's self image is bright and beautiful, ideal inside, then you will not give yourself permission to do activities that is not worthy of that person. So to see that like modern humanity, they engage in a lot of, all of us have tendency to engage in a lot of unworthy activities. That is speaks to the nature of our self-image. And although, and the irony of it, I don't know if irony is the right word here, but the modern world, we have this, social media, for example, world where we present these images of ourselves, to get the likes, which basically speaks of the level of insecurity and overcompensation that is taking place for poor self-image. So here she tries his sama technique, pacify him by reminding him of his former glory and a brighter and more beautiful self-image. That wasn't working. So now in this particular verse that we're looking at, she was trying the beta technique, giving the logic, or sometimes trickery is also used to convince someone to make their mind separate from their purpose. So the purpose of Sodasa now is to eat the Brahmana. So she wants to make his mind beta, separate from that. So she's trying to apply the logic, which still kind of appeals to his former values before he was cursed to become a Rakshasa. So here she is saying, Katam Vadam, how is it possible for Manyate Samato Bhavan? Katam Vadam Yata Babrur Manyate Samato Bhavan. So she says, you're a good self, you're Satmataha. You are recognized in, the higher circles as a good person. Sat. So she wants to know, Katam Vadam Manyate, how is it that you are thinking of killing this Brahmana? So who is this Brahmana? Tasya Sadora Papasya Brunasha Brahma Vadina. He is learned and Shastra, Brahma Vadina. He is Apapasya, means he is without sin, and he is a sadhu. So how is it that you are thinking of killing such a qualified person? This is as bad as killing a cow or killing the embryo in the womb. So we hear from Srila Prabhupada's purports that in Vedic culture, one of the criteria that was looked at for saying of a society was healthy and could be continued without disintegration. There were 5 factors to be looked at seriously: the state of the Brahminical class, the state of cows, the state of children, including the embryo in the womb, the state of women, and the state of the elderly. These are the 5 criteria by which one can understand the pulse and the health of a social culture. So if these 5 are demoralized or compromised in any way, then that society cannot last in a healthy way for very long. And we don't have to look far for evidence of that. Our own world situation all over, but in America here also specifically, we see what is happening to women, cows, children. The Brahminical class practically doesn't exist anymore, and the elderly. So the society is doomed. And I know there are many social movements today that propose various ideas for bringing about, a better society. But such proposals that don't make consideration of these 5 factors, and that too, even if they discover that these 5 factors of a problem are there, if the government doesn't recognize it, right? Because they're the ones with all the power, Kshatriyas. kshatriya, the word kshatriya, kshatrayate, means to protect from the violence. So the government officials who are supposed to be in that position, they don't recognize, then there's no question of the society improving, and not possible. These things, one cannot perform sinful activities against these five and expect that the society can flourish in any way whatsoever. That is impossible. So now we are seeing, of course, all these social movements are there. They will get bigger and they will get worse because there's so much sinful activity going on against these particular five. And specifically here, Prabhupada is focusing on the killing of the embryo within the womb. This, of course, has become a very sensitive subject matter in the 21st century. And the reason it's become a sensitive subject matter is because of the metaphysics that underpins the discussion. Most of modern humanity, their metaphysics, and when I say metaphysics, I mean their concept of the self, their concept of the world, and their concept of the source of the world. These three. That is all metaphysics basically deals with: self-conception, world conception, and the conception of the source of these two. Right. So in our philosophy, for example, we have a concept of the self as the jiva. We have a concept of the world, Maya Shakti. And then there's a concept of the source. Bhagavan is the source. It's the personal source of these three. And then the relationship of these three, that is the basis of our understanding, our metaphysical understanding of reality, for example. So that is basically what metaphysics is. So the modern world, their metaphysics is informed by what will be called a more scientific understanding, which informs us that the self is simply matter, simply a combination of chemicals. And the quality of self-awareness or subjectivity, they don't know precisely what it is, why a combination of matter should be aware, because everything in this world is a combination of matter. The human body, of course, is a combination, the animal body, but also the iPhone, the computer, the chair that we may be sitting on. There are also combinations of matter, but they are not self-aware. So why should one combination of matter become self-aware and the other combination not? So that is the hard problem of consciousness. They say there's the easy problem of consciousness. This is from a philosopher named David Chalmers, but his thing has remained popular from what I hear, even in scientific circles, that there's an easy problem of consciousness and the hard problem of consciousness. The easy problem of consciousness is how we process how we process things. Because that part is easier, like how consciousness understands things in this world. We have our own way of talking about it when we discuss the subtle body, but scientists have their own way of discussing how we process information in this world and so on. That is the easy problem of consciousness, how we experience things in this world. But the hard problem of consciousness is why we experience anything whatsoever. That problem that one can actually solve by empirical methods, because Krishna informs us in the Bhagavad Gita that consciousness, the soul, the individual jiva, is achintya. So achintya means not able to be understood by the mental faculties, because the soul is beyond matter. So the mental faculties at best can only indicate that there's a conscious entity separate from matter, but it cannot prove it empirically. Therefore, although we know we're conscious, there's no way to actually prove it by empirical methods. So they call this as the hard problem of consciousness. If you'd like to look up that distinction, you can look up David Chalmers, Easy and Hard Problems of Consciousness. Very fascinating subject matter, the language that he uses to describe that. In any case, what the layman has inherited through their education is that we are actually a combination of matter. And what we call as consciousness, even the hard problem of consciousness, is described as some sort of epiphenomena, some random thing that comes up with a certain combination of chemicals. So with that metaphysics at play, when the subject matter of like abortion, like killing the embryo in the womb comes up, people argue with that metaphysics informing their arguments. So the argument basically goes that the embryo in the womb is not yet life, essentially. And therefore, there is no impropriety incurred if one kills the embryo in the womb. That is basically simple. It's a lot of the argument in modern social public, debates and so on, gets centered largely around the autonomy of the woman and her ability to make her own choice concerning, they don't call it as a living entity, but the chemicals in the body of the woman. I don't do this anymore, but many, many years ago, I got into Facebook debates about the topic of abortion, which I don't entertain these things after 2020. I've learned my lesson, I hope, I think. But in any case, before I was doing, so this were the arguments that I was giving. And I can understand what I don't really judge that because it's congruent with the metaphysics that they follow. So there is no judgment there. But here we are, Prabhupada says this is the challenge of the Vedic culture and in his purport, that life comes from life essentially. Consciousness is not simply an epiphenomenon of matter, but it is separate from matter. And when consciousness enters inside matter, it causes matter to go through 6 transformations. First transformation is to appear, right? To take birth or combine, and then to grow. That is the second transformation, vikara. Vikara means transformation. And then after growing, then it produces some byproducts. And then the fourth vikara is, I call it time waste. So we're just doing things in the world. And then the fifth vikara is dwindling, old age and diseases there. And then the sixth vikara is death, perishing. So this is the 6 vikaras that take place when consciousness enters inside matter. So our argument is that consciousness enters inside and therefore there can be growth. That is one of our basic understandings. So the so-called chemicals inside the womb of a woman, it cannot grow unless there was life there, the life of the individual jiva. So we may have basic understanding that there's life there. There's life means there's an entity, a subject who has meaning for itself. That is the difference between subjects and objects. Objects do not have meaning for themselves, so you can do with it what you will. Like a computer is an object that does not have meaning for itself. So if you want to throw it in the river also, I don't think any of us have the ability to do that because we are attached. But if we wanted to, it will not make any protest because it doesn't have meaning for itself. But a subject is an entity that has meaning for itself. Maybe it doesn't think highly of itself but it has I awareness, it has meaning for itself. So the living entity that's in the womb is a subject. So it also has its own person, which means it has meaning for itself. It may not be very well developed in that particular state, but it is there. And therefore, I'm saying the word it, being a person, you can't just your autonomy cannot just impose, your choices, I should say, rather, cannot just impose on an entity who has meaning for itself. This is why they, give it, to put this in another context, why people protest the objectification of women, for example. Why? Because objectification leads to violence. Once you can objectify something, then you don't have to consider if it has meaning for itself. You only look at it in terms of what it can do for you. And that is the fundamental basis of violence. Not considering that this entity has meaning for itself. That is the basis of violence. It is a type of impersonalism. You depersonalize a person, then you can do whatever you want with them. Another example, give it another context. When you look at, let's say Nazi Germany, for example, before they can persecute, they had to depersonalize the persons they were trying to persecute. Only after depersonalizing, then you can perform any heinous act of violence. Take it another context. Animals suffer the worst genocide, even to this day. They're suffering great genocide. All over the aquatics in the water, genocide is taking place. What to speak of cows and chickens and pigs and these sorts of species. How is it possible to do such violent acts? Only by depersonalizing them that it becomes possible. So, following the metaphysics of what Prabhupada is calling here as a nonsensical scientist, that we're all just matter, that sets the stage for a profound depersonalization of existence. And after that depersonalization of existence is established, then any violence can take place, including what we would call as the violence of abortion, killing the embryo within the womb. That is also a type of violence that is based on depersonalization, based on their metaphysics. So the modern presentation of truth is a very dangerous one because it takes spirit out of the formula. It takes consciousness out of the formula. And so that becomes very dangerous. What is the main danger? So this is described in Srimad Bhagavatam also, Jivo Jivasta Jivanam, that the weak are the food for the strong, right? That is that is human. That is not human. That is nature itself. Nature exists as in a dominance hierarchy. It is unavoidable. Even now, people, as they clamor about equality, they want to remove those who they consider to be oppressors. Well, how do you remove them without dominating them? So you can't remove the dominance hierarchy. It's impossible. You can only replace who's at the top at best of the dominance hierarchy, but you cannot remove it because it is actually part of nature, as much as wind and fire is part of nature. So the dominance hierarchy is also part of nature. So since that is there, so it manifests itself in humankind also. But humankind, we have the intelligence to understand that there's life behind the curtain of matter. Of course, in previous traditions, they would teach that. They taught about the soul. And so therefore, the manifestation of the dominance hierarchy will play itself out, but without the depersonalization and the contempt that makes it so destructive in human life. See, in animal life, it is there. If a lion or a tiger eats a deer, no one will complain. It is there, but the lion doesn't go beyond that. He'll eat one deer, boss, finish. But in human life, he can really transgress. He'll eat one deer and then he'll kill, a whole species, for making the money, for saving this, that, and the other. So he has this intelligence to transcend, but if he doesn't use it to transcend, then he transgress. And the dominance hierarchy manifests with profound depersonalization, and there was the other one, and contempt. So this is what makes it destructive in human life. The contempt. In other words, you can be in a higher position socially. It doesn't have to actually be an issue if there's no contempt. I've seen this play out. I don't know about India, but I've seen it play out in South America where the servants who serve, they're in a socially low position as far as social standards are concerned, but they serve in these rich people's homes. I've seen it personally with my own eyes in South America, and they're practically like family, because although there's a dominance there, a social dominance, there is no contempt. I'm not saying across the board. I'm talking about the particular house I was in. So maybe there's contempt in other houses. I'm just giving an example of a particular thing that I saw. There was no contempt, so there could be harmony, even though there was a dominance hierarchy there. And you will hear about this in Chaitanya Bhagavat. And the Srivas Thakur, he had many servants in the house. They weren't devotees. And you'll hear about this when Mahaprabhu does his Mahaprakash Leela, when he's giving benedictions to all the devotees. When he gives benedictions to Srivas Thakur, he also blessed all the servants in the house because they were serving so ticely. There was respect. There was lack of contempt. So although it was a social dominance hierarchy there, it wasn't destructive in nature because there wasn't depersonalization, there wasn't contempt. That's the kind of basic point I'm making. But when you have a metaphysics that says actually we're just matter, and you take out the conscious aspect of the formula, then you allow the impersonalism to settle in, and this dominance hierarchy to play itself out without consciousness, right? Without consciousness, and you can say without conscience, right? Conscience means like, oh, this is not, guy shouldn't do this thing. So that is allowed to play itself out now without any barrier to its destructive quality. So it's a very dangerous metaphysics to have. And so, of course, the children in the womb, they are persons as far as we're concerned, as far as this purport is concerned, and they have to suffer the consequences of this metaphysics. You know, people find philosophy boring, but we have to know that at the root of all of our social and spiritual exigencies is a understanding of reality, right? That's a metaphysics. And any problem there will manifest, it has consequence. It is not without its severe consequences. And so Prabhupada is indicating this here, that now there's so many children in the womb. If you take the time out to see the level of abortion rates that are happening, and that too, I know often it's brought up, well, what about rape and so on? That's actually the smallest percentage of abortions that takes place. The vast majority of them are just due to other factors. We'll just leave it at that. And it's sad, actually. But you know, I'm not saying that as a judgment call per se of the people in general who do that, but I do say it as a judgment of the metaphysics that informs that decision. And not only because of the abortion, but I judge it because I think it's dangerous for me. Let's be real, like we're self-centered. I'm totally self-centered. This is just natural as a conditioned jiva. And I know how that's going to manifest in relationship to me. Suppose I meet some love interest in the future that has that metaphysics, then that's going to impact our relationship. And it's going to allow for impersonal dysfunction to enter in, and not, and that person won't be able to see me as an entity having meaning for himself because of his metaphysics, for example. So I don't say this as a judgment of those decisions based on this metaphysics, but I do say it as a judgment of the metaphysics because it's dangerous. And the world is already suffering the consequences of this understanding, and it will suffer more, unfortunately. Therefore, the only solution to this is education of Krishna consciousness. Specifically, we say that, but also at least minimally education that no, there's consciousness. There is life that is different from Prakriti. That basic bare minimum has to be there. That was Prabhupada's one of his main criticisms of modern education. Where are they teaching about soul? This is so critical for just, even for your social life, this will be a critical understanding. But they don't teach this thing. They teach all nonsense things, especially now. It's the nonsense has increased a lot more than when we were growing up. And it will not help people, unfortunately, because they can't see themselves as different from matter. So this impersonal dysfunction will continue to plague the societies and bring them down. So here she is trying to appeal to this by the logic, you know, killing a Brahmana is like killing a child in the womb or killing a cow. This is very sinful. You should not do. Unfortunately, as we'll come to hear, because of his swabhava, his demonic nature, he was not able to take into consideration her upayasa, her diplomacy, her attempts for conciliation and logic. And that was going to be another point I brought up, but I don't have to bring it up now. It's in one sense, it's for the future verse. He's not able to consider because his nature disallowed him from doing so. So, yeah, that's unfortunate. So I'm going to end here. I think I covered all the basic ideas here in the purport. And I guess we can take questions. I like to leave some time, at least 10 minutes at least, for anyone who wants to bring up some other angle of vision or some question they have. That's
Hi, Krishna.
Hare
One thing I want to ask is, generally we see in Bhagavatam and everywhere like how killing of cows or killing of Brahmana is kind of considered like very sinful and is like prohibited. But in general, killing anyone or killing any animal is kind of is also
is
is
bad.
sinful, but is bad. Like is if like yeah, who cares about sinful these days? But at least it is bad. It's like equally. How does like how does like Srimad Bhagavatam view in just in terms of like killing other people or causing unnecessary harm to other living entities? Like, is there more focus on a generic sense, or it's just like cows, or it's like just brahmana, like that?
This is an intuitive understanding because Bhagavatam doesn't deal with the subject matter of society so much. Rather, their thing is like reject society. That's basically the thread of Bhagavatam. Absorb yourself in Krishna Bhakti. What is this society stuff? That's the Vedantic aspect of Bhagavad philosophy. So if you're we can only get intuitive insights about social stuff by reading, Prabhupada's purports. You get a little bit of intuitive insight. But unless we deal with the literatures that deal with a society, like Karmakanda literatures, we won't be able to present the full and accurate picture of what Vedic culture really was about at that particular time. So my intuitive understanding is that there's a generic verse that to kill any living entity is considered sinful. The reason why they zoom in on brahmanas, cows, women, children, elderly, is because everyone's position in the social structure isn't the same. Some people's position in the social structure is more important than other people's position in the social structure. Just like if you have an organization, and you have the head of the organization, his position is going to be more important than the janitor. Both of them are important. So when we say more important, that just means important is there, and then there's more important. So both are important, but one is more important because it serves a particular function for the integrity of the society, or let's say the organization. One position may be less replaceable than another position. And so it's not that all positions in a social structure are equal. That is obviously patently nonsense. That's impossible. So as far as maintaining social integrity is concerned, brahmanas and cows specifically are most important, specifically because their function is tied to the yajna. And yajna, as we hear from the Bhagavad Gita, is the principle that actually makes the world go round, so to speak. I call it as the circle of life. I discussed these verses many times here in Bhakti Center. But if you go to Gita 14 through 16, the yajna is actually, yajna means sacrifice or offering. It is the main principle that holds a society together. And brahmanas and cows are critical to those processes of yajna. So their position socially is more esteemed than just like, any old person. So although to kill anyone is sinful and you have to suffer the consequences of that transgression, to kill a brahmana or a cow specifically is extremely sinful, because that means you're compromising the principle of yajna also, which actually sustains a whole community and a whole world. Right? Krishna himself is saying that all over the Gita. Actually, he's situated in the acts of yajna. Those who do not perform the yajna live in vain, live uselessly, and so on. So many verses are there. So that's my intuitive understanding of why Shastra would, give this sort of hierarchy to the different entities there.
Thank you, bro. I really appreciate how you presented. Like from Bhagavatam, there are certain things that we can deduce, but for this, we need like more scriptures which deal with the Vedic society.
Yes.
Because personally, I ask these questions because I currently am in India. I deal with a certain kind of a societal mindset, because now, like, why cows? Why only brahmanas? Because it becomes more of a right philosophy politically.
Right.
And then the other people just feel like there is no equality here. It's just oppression, all these kind of understandings. So that's why
there's
they
no
blame
equality.
the
What is the
scriptures.
problem? Everyone gets pinched by that. What is the problem? The problem is the contempt. That is a problem. The lack of equality is not actually a problem. That is very good, actually. You don't want all the functions of your body working like a head. That would be very problematic. If the hands work like a head and the legs also work like a head, that would be a big problem. You want the head working like a head, arms working like arms, legs working like. So the lack of equality is not the problem. It's the contempt that has caused this issue now. So now everyone has to clamor for equality, but that will not be. Is impossible. So now we have to.
True. Asking for like kind of an artificial equality, and then also like literally mudslinging on the scriptures, which uh, which speak about spiritual principles but are perceived as oppressive statements. So then it
No.
causes like a complete confusion about the scriptures and lack of respect for them. So thank you for
Yeah, that
clarifying.
is
Appreciate
problematic.
the
See
answer.
the Srimad Bhagavatam Purana Amalam, Ya Vaishnavanam Priyam. Well, the Srimad Bhagavatam is very dear to the Vaishnavas, Vaishnavanam Priyam, because it is Amala Purana. So Amala, this is where Amala means without the tincture. So tincture means what? All these weird and crazy like rules that comes up and maintaining social integrity. If you read Karma Kanda, like I've never looked at Karma Kanda Shastra, but there's this one commentary in the Chaitanya Bhagavat from Srila Bhakti Siddhanta where he's describing all the categories of sins. You know, there are different categories: pop, maha, pop, ati, pop. There are many categories of sins. And when you look at some of the sins, you're like, this is so weird. like something like literally the strangest things that you would have ever heard and that you could be like severely punished for. No, it's just like there's this whole section in the Bible, Leviticus, that and then like if you eat a certain fish, you can get your head cut off. Like these like very severe punishments for things that seem like very minor. Like if you wear wool on the wrong day, then there could be like this severe. So we like, many times people bring stuff up like that from the Bible and criticize it. I'm like, well, if you look at Karma Kanda, we got some really strange things in there also that would be like, for the modern sentiment, would be like completely abominable. So Bhagavatam is called Amala Purana because it doesn't have that sort of stuff, because their consideration isn't the social world. Their consideration is the relationship of the soul with its source, with Krishna. And so that's beautiful. It's not really concerned about this. And when it comes up, in like Shastra, like Bhagavatam, it's usually only setting the social context in which bhakti is going to express itself in a very particular way. But it's not actually really commenting about that social stuff for which it's not actually concerned about. From the very outset of the teachings from Sutta Goswami, in the very first chapters of the Bhagavatam, which is establishing the basic principles that we're going to encounter throughout the Bhagavatam, Ata Pumbir, Dvijashreshta, Varnashrama Vibhagashaha, Sanushtitasa Dharmasha, Samsada Haritoshana. The goal of Varnashram is to please Hari, Samsada Haritoshana. That is the perfection of Varnashram. That's a setup point. So we always like to bring that verse up. So like whatever you're doing in society, it should please Krishna. But actually, Sutta Goswami's intention is to dismiss this. He says, since that is a perfection of Varnashram, is to please Hari, Tasmat, therefore, Ekana Manasa, with one mind, just do Krishna Bhajan, because Krishna Bhajan satisfies Hari. If you have to, why struggle only to come to the point that the perfection of whatever you're doing is to actually just please Hari? Well, Hari can be pleased just by Hari Bhajan. So you do only Hari Bhajan. Ekana Manasa, just with that one mind on Hari Bhajan, you Shotavya Kirtitavya Shadaya Puja Shanitida. You just do Hari Bhajan and Hari will be pleased. So the perfection is there. So the whole idea is, it's pretty, I wouldn't say dismissive, but its concern is not Varnashram, which is also considered as a cheating dharma for the Bhagavatam. Dharma prochita kaitava atrapadamo. It is also considered as a kaitava dharma, actually. It begins with Varnashram dharma. And now, of course, when we're giving the class, because bhakti is a little bit abstract, so we start talking about points about the mind and swabhava and how you could be situated in your life properly. And people eat that up like anything because it's material and we're materialistic. So we like to hear those topics, even as devotees. But actually, the Bhagavatam is not concerned about that. So we shouldn't, like I said, I think we should qualify our answers about the social world by saying this is an intuitive insight based on how I've encountered it in Bhagavatam and the commentaries. But if we're going to really present the social world of the so-called Vedic culture, you have to study Karma Kanda. And even then, you may not be able to understand it fully because our cultures today don't match any of those things. So that's going to create a significant obstacle to like a healthy understanding of it. Anyway, that's my conviction about it. I think it's fair to qualify. I said this is an intuitive insight. I'm not 100%. It can't say 100% how this actually played itself out. it's hard to imagine a hierarchy today without contempt. So if you talk about it, how do you understand a hierarchy in Vedic culture when you have this thing, these horrible impressions of contempt playing out in your head in the hierarchies that we encounter today? It's not going to sound very nice or beautiful whatsoever. Just do Krishna Bhakti, y'all. Chant Hare Krishna.
Bhagavatam kind of feels like a transcendental social rebel.
A transcendental?
Social rebel.
Yeah, for sure. That's what makes most Westerners attracted to it. Yeah. If you look at the Goswamis or Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's time, right? They were all revolutionaries and their works were so controversial precisely because they were saying Bhakti doesn't need Varnashram. You know, Varnashram is beneath Bhakti. If you quit Varnashram and you just do Bhakti, there's no hardly any consequence. What is the problem? Whereas if you don't do Bhakti and you're nicely situated, what is the gain? These are all very controversial ideas for especially the time and the place where they appeared in India. You know, and so our sampradaya is from the very outset revolution. And then we come in and say, so the Vaishnavas, they kind of like that part, but then we say, actually, Krishna is the source of all the forms of Godhead. Then they get upset. And they say, we know what we're gonna throw you another one. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he is that Krishna. And they're like, my God, these people. And they and then we have big influence. And Mahaprabhu goes around, makes everyone devotees, and then later on ISKCON comes and we're making everyone devotees. So that becomes a big problem actually for a lot of people. Their hearts get pulled in so many ways. It's very nice.
Like I can imagine the times of the Goswamis because today I was just chanting my Gayatri at home. I had a guest coming who was a Brahmana family. I'm not from a Brahmin family.
Okay.
He was so shocked that I was doing Gayatri. I just could see the shock in his face, and he was completely like shocked. So I just got up quietly and just left the place because I know. So even today, if this is like this can create such a controversy. Yes. Can imagine times of Mahaprabhu.
Jai. Prabhupada said, Tavarvi Sargo Janataga Viplavo. The way he translates this is that this Bhagavatam, Tavagvi Sargo, refers to the words of the Bhagavat. They are meant to create a revolution. That's the only word we need to hear in the Western world. Yeah, revolution. Whatever the rest of the verse is saying, that is not as important. Yeah, I'm about that revolution. Yeah, where I sign up. So this is the glorious Srimad Bhagavatam. It is if you study Bhagavatam very deeply, it's very bewildering actually. If you're really into like social things, like it's not only is it bewildering for the Vedic social world, but it's also bewildering for the modern social sensitivities also. It's just like unpredictable. You know, a Vitrasura who's a demon is a great bhakta, but an Indra who's a nicely situated person is like considered as demon. Like what? Bhagavatam is like flipping everything upside down, and well, such is the nature of spirit. It doesn't conform to matter. Such is the nature of spirit. So it's a little interesting. Okay. Is there any other questions? Someone wants to ask something. Okay. Really appreciate your point that without a clear sense of self, we are more apt to doing undesirable things. Yeah, that's a fact. Hare Krishna. Athena has a question. It says here, should we take? Our time is, we can take.
Yes, bro. As long as you have time and she is here.
Hare Krishna, JJP, Dandavat Pranams. I've missed your classes very much, so I'm very happy you're speaking this morning. Well, I'm not sure if you have another class, but I have about 4 questions, but maybe I just stick to one now. I was curious, and this is just first a detail I want to make sure I understand. Was the king cursed to be a Rakshasa, like actually take Rakshasa, say form, and of course the mindset? or his nature was just changed to have a Rakshasa mentality. And the reason why I asked that was it's unclear to me that we understand in the truest form that one's nature does not change. Yet, if he was cursed, perhaps I guess that has the ability to change your nature, that a Kshatriya mindset has now changed to a Rakshasa mindset, even though he didn't change in forms. But I didn't quite understand, for example, even in prior times, not when we're all, everyone doesn't have a clear swabhava and swadharma, that, for example, Dramacharya, who is a Brahmana, became a Kshatriya, and then say Parshuram, who is also a Brahmana, I mean, he's fighting all these wars and he's killing all those like 21 generations of Kshatriya, so he also seems to have a very Kshatriya mentality. And so therefore it seems like, and then I think there's a story in the Chaitanya Charamrita where I think a Brahmana also changes, or a Kshatriya turns into a Brahmana. So one's nature has the ability to change. So could you just comment on that? Because my understanding was that one's nature can't change, but we do see examples here that it can, and I guess even by cursing, even if you stay human form and Kshatriya, one's nature can change.
Vaishnav, so Dasa in this canto, this is only his swabhava change, or his form also change?
I didn't go through the pastime to that detail actually very keenly.
Yes.
I may have to look through the translation to see if there are any clues.
Yeah, I also don't know
that.
But as far as the question is concerned, nature, of course, can change. What we call it swabhava, or nature, is just a sort of mental program, like a software. Brain is like hard drive, you can say. And the most prominent impressions governing our life, gathered from previous lives, the most prominent impressions governing our life now, that is called a swabhava. So swabhava just means the most prominent, some scars that govern the life now. That is called as the swabhava. I just want to, I wasn't sure, this one lady here, walking around her house. I don't know if you mind us like taking a tour of your house. I just want to let you know, in case you didn't know your camera was on or not. So swabhava is just like the mental programming. So the mental programming can be changed actually, but you start your life off with a prominent software, or a prominent mental programming in this life. And most people are so heavily governed by that they have no ability to shift it. And nearly impossible, actually. And there are certain things about the mental programming that one has that will be fixed, even though you can change other aspects of the program. There's some aspects of the programming that cannot be changed, for sure. So like that, natures are changing all the time, right? Usually the changes happen when you go from one body to another. That's when the changes usually happen. But sometimes it can happen through various suddenness that you can change a lot of elements of the programming. Certain elements may not be able to be changed, but a lot of elements can be shifted or changed by various sorts of practices. That's what people try to do in the wellness community and self-help world. They try to change some of the mental algorithms that's governing people's lives and causing them to suffer. And so by different techniques and habit building, this, that, and the other, they can try to change a lot of those things. So that is possible. Certain aspects of a nature can be reprogrammed or reshifted. Not all aspects, but many aspects can be adjusted through various practices. And of course, through Bhakti, we hear that your prarabdha karma can be dissolved by Shuddha Bhakti, which means that the nature can be changed completely by the culture of Shuddha Bhakti that we hear in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. So that is also possible. But it doesn't happen a lot because people are so unaware of the soul mind dichotomy. So you can only really change it if you have a sense that yourself is different from your mind. And therefore you really can start working with the mold of the mind and shape it in some specific way. But most people don't have that metaphysics. So therefore there's no question of changing nature, because you need a lot of self-awareness. And when I say self, I mean the Atman awareness, to know that I'm distinct from this, and then I can like mold it in a particular way.
Thank you. And when I make this I apologize. I'm not being pedantic, but I remember long ago in your classes, I wasn't so I haven't read so much Shastra, and I'm still not very well read, but I said, well, no, your nature can change. And I think you jokingly said, yeah, good luck.
Yeah, that's a fact, right?
Oh, then they say, are you commenting on the general public? Yeah, good luck. Because they don't.
Not only general public, also general devotee. It was like when you go to, for example, the passage you can read in Kaliya Lila. So after Krishna chastised Kaliya, then Kaliya's wives offer prayers. Then Kaliya himself offers prayers. And his prayers are very short. And his prayer is basically that I have the swabhava of a snake. And we are by nature very envious. And we, attack people unnecessarily and so on. And he said very hard to change the swabhava of a person who identifies with it. Illusion is very strong. So therefore, please give me your grace, give me your mercy. Otherwise, there's no hope for me. So yes, good luck. Most people, general devotee or general master people, they'll not be able to do much with their nature. It will be there. So my good luck comment still stands. But as far as it being a possibility, it is possible. If you do Gyan Sadhana, Yoga Sadhana, if you take it to the extreme point, then the Swabhava will be changed completely. Not completely, but almost completely. And if you do Bhakti and you grow to stages of Nishta, Ruchi, Sakti, your Swabhava will be changed quite comprehensively. What to speak of if you get bhaved and your Swabhava completely changed at that point. But for the general devotee, general master people, my good luck comment is that's the right comment.
Thank you, and your explanation makes a lot of sense, and in what you said, it resonates and seems in line. And yes, that pramana resonates with me. I hope this isn't a long question, and you're the perfect person to ask because I feel like you've thought a lot about this, and obviously you support everything you say with a lot of pramana. Wanting to talk about, so I'm taking a subject that you mentioned, and this is a question that I've been wondering. You mentioned, again, the self, the jiva, or the soul is a part of Krishna. And I was having this theological discussion. So the Vedic epistemology believes that the soul is part of Krishna. It was never created. We say that the soul is eternal. So eternal means there is no beginning and there is no end. Once there is, then it is no longer considered eternal. Then the question is, so if we hold that strong, that again, we don't believe we were created by Krishna, we're just part of Krishna, we're his Shakti. So when Krishna has existed, since time existed, then we have always existed. We've always been eternal. Then the question is that God, who is omnipotent, all powerful, can do absolutely anything and everything he wants. Then the question is, could he create a soul? Could he destroy a soul? Because he is omnipotent and the argument that, well, one cannot separate the sunlight from the sun. The argument is that that's, say, anthropomorphism, saying we, from our material perspective, we're applying something to God, who is all powerful. So if God wanted to, he can separate the sunlight from the sun globe. He can separate the soul from himself. And so how do we reconcile the two, that we believe that the soul is eternal and part of Krishna, and then we also believe that God can do anything. He could destroy the whole spiritual
that is fine.
world.
So if he can do it, why would he do it?
Well, that's why
he doesn't mention anything like that in the Shastra that I'm aware of. So Shastra is just telling how reality is. So yes, Krishna could create. This is like the question they ask: can God create a rock that he can't lift? So the idea of these sorts of questions is to show that there is some limitation in the Godhead, and therefore the premise that he's omnipotent doesn't stand, because there's some limitation there. If God can't create a rock that he can't lift, that means his creative potency is limited. And if he can create a rock that he can't lift, that means his strength potency is limited, bala potency is limited, right? So either his bala potency is limited or his kriya potency is limited. They'll say like this. And that way, God is limited. And that's what, through the logic, they'll try to make some argument. But God is not subjected to anyone's logic. So can he do? He can do anything. That is what we hear from Shastra, generally speaking. But does he do anything like that? We don't hear anything like that. What we hear is that there are literally unlimited souls, which is inconceivable. There are literally unlimited worlds, not only material, but also spiritual, which is equally inconceivable. Even when some jiva gets liberated from this world, because then that question comes also, if jivas get liberated, that at one point the material world should become empty. If souls keep getting liberated, then at one point the material world will become empty of souls. No, as one soul is liberated, another soul that was sleeping in susupti gets manifested to continue his thing of karma, and this is going on forevermore. So we hear things like that. So we're dealing with a category that is actually completely inconceivable. Now, infinite category of unlimited entities, unlimited worlds. That how we are to understand these things. These things are either accepted or rejected, but they cannot really be understood by the mind. Even when you say something like eternal, it doesn't have beginning or end. How does the mind actually understand that? That itself is an inconceivable category. Something that has no beginning and has no end. If you sit down and look at yourself in the mirror and contemplate that, you might be in a dangerous situation mentally. So Lord is called as a dokshaja. So he is one who keeps the akshaja gyan beneath him. Akshaja gyan means the knowledge acquired through the psychophysical apparatus, including the logic. How you understand, you either accept these things or you don't, but it cannot really be understood by the logic because it's an infinite category and we are finite. So naturally we think in terms of finite categories. So that's why we give some argument like this. Well, if God is omnipotent, but the soul is, and then we start making calculations like this, and it makes sense to us also, and that is true from our finite perspective. But God is infinite, so it's hard to understand how this could, that quality and the Godhead.
So if I could restate it back, God is limitless. God can never be limited. So thus, there is a possibility that he can create and destroy jivas. He can destroy the spiritual world. But the argument that we have is that while he can, he won't. He wouldn't. While he absolutely could exist.
That is also the reason this argument doesn't work actually in the context of Vedanta philosophy is because everything is him. So essentially asking God to do that is asking him to destroy himself. So that's what you're basically asking. That can God destroy himself? Because we say reality is non-dual, right? It is not that there's a soul is separate from God or that the world is separate from God. Nothing is actually separate from him. That's why we say the sun and sunshine. You already gave that example. So nothing is actually separate from him. So essentially the question is, can God kill himself? That is actually essentially what the question will boil down to. And if he can't kill himself, then that means that he has some limitation. That is where the logic is actually leading. Why doesn't God create more souls? Actually, there's nothing outside of him. Everything is a part of him. Everything's existing with him in unlimited categories. So yeah, these sorts of statements or logic works in a metaphysics that sees God as separate from the things that he creates. They're like in two different like spatial, I don't know how the words, but they're not linked like sun and sunshine, as we say, but they're like separate. So then God can create or kill some jiva, make some jiva. That it works when you have that separation is there, but actually there are no separate categories. There's only Krishna actually, and then there's his Shaktis, and they're existing like sun and sunshine eternally together. So God cannot kill himself, and to kill a jiva or to kill a world or destroy a world, where it ceases to exist and it won't manifest anymore, that's like killing himself. That's like asking the sunshine to take away one of its rays. So no, that is not going to happen. God does not kill himself. Whether it be a jiva or a world, he does not kill himself. We don't hear anything like that from Shastra. And if you say, well, but can he kill himself? That is a question. And if he can't kill himself, then he has some limitation. Okay, so if that's what you want to believe.
Thank you. That was such an incredible answer, because I was trying to answer it from the point of he can, but he wouldn't. And then the argument is that then there's some limitation on God. And then therefore you're also, and my argument was that, well, again, you're right. Everything is there. It's from the like metaphysical, our logic. For example, if I have the definition of eternal, but yet it can be destroyed, that means it's no longer eternal. Therefore, then ontologically, it was never eternal. So that's not possible. But what you boiled it down to makes a lot of sense to me is that everything is Krishna. Ultimately, everything is the manifestation of Krishna. So he wouldn't destroy the spiritual world because it is him. So,
Yes.
And he wouldn't himself, and he wouldn't destroy himself. But and then of course you say, well, could he? Then that limits him. But ultimately, just boils down to everything is a manifestation of Krishna.
Yes.
And that's very interesting. And now I have to go back, because while that might be our Vedic epistemology and understanding that everything that there is non-dual. Of course, that word is very touchy in the Vedanta sense. But understanding perhaps, the Abrahamic religions, what they're, they believe that God created and that we're created. And so maybe fundamentally it's like, there's no crossover because the fundamental philosophy might be different. And so there's no way to reconcile that. I'm not sure. That's just more food for thought from myself.
I don't know about other philosophies, so I cannot say how they might deal with this sort of thing.
Thank you. I have
Kartik has one question here. He says, I apologize if this is a naive question. You mentioned that society is doomed. Yes. Due to all the impersonal dysfunction. Yes. And also that our swabhava cannot change. Then where's the hope? The hope is in chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Therefore, we should ourselves try to become Krishna conscious, and we should try to help others to do the same. That is the hope. Kalo dosho nide rajan, nasi heko mahagona, kirtana Krishna evasya, what is that? Mukta Sangha Paramvrajat. I haven't quoted this verse in like 10 years. I don't know if I quoted it properly. Kali Yuga is an ocean of faults, but there is one good quality, one great quality, Mahaguna. And that is the kirtan of Krishna's names. So that's the hope. Take it from me. No, take it from me. Take it from Shastra and the Acharya Vani. And if someone doesn't want to agree to that, then there's no hope. Good luck. But there's no hope. Just like Krishna says in Gita 261, there's this problem that comes that in order to control your senses, you need a higher taste. But in order to get a higher taste, you need to control your senses. So this is called the fault of mutual dependence. So how does it get reconciled? So Krishna said, actually, you start with controlling your senses, and then you think of me to keep them like that. So someone said, but I don't want to think of you. So Krishna said, all right, and then this thing will come up, that you'll contemplate objects of the senses, and from there you'll get attached, then lust, then anger, then bewilderment, then loss of memory, then the destruction of your intelligence, and then you'll perish. So if someone doesn't want to think of Krishna, then that's the result. This is 261 through 263 Gita. So similarly, we say, chant Hare Krishna. And they say, I don't want to chant Hare Krishna. All right, good luck. That is the presentation of the Bhagavad, more or less. There's basically no hope, especially now because materialistic people don't want to follow any guidance. They want to figure everything out. So they're making a mess of everything and it's making it hopeless for everyone. And so since they're doing like that nicely, now we say chant Hare Krishna though. Now everything is nice for us to just embrace our spirituality full throttle. If someone says, I don't agree to that, okay, then carry on. Good luck to you. But if we are smart, then we will just embrace Krishna consciousness. That is actually the only hope in the age of Kali. Be convinced. So I think we'll stop here. I thank you all very much for tolerating me this time for those of you who were able to do so. Congratulations. You're quite a perseverant personality. I'm sure you'll meet with all auspiciousness in your life. And thank you for inviting me to continue to give classes. And all glories to Srila Prabhupada. All glories to all of you. Hare Krishna.
His guest Jaya Jagannath Prabhu ki jai. Thank you for making our lives auspicious. Thank you very much, Prabhu. Hare Krishna. See you soon, Prabhu. Hare Krishna. Thank you, everyone. See you tomorrow. Hare Krishna.
Very well.
Thank you so much, Jaya Jagannath Prabhu.